When Donald Trump landed in Saudi Arabia, it wasn't just a state visit, it looked like a scene out of a Hollywood fantasy. Purple carpets, golden thrones, fireworks lighting up the Riyadh sky. It felt like a king had arrived. But behind, the theatrics was something far more powerful than ceremony. A $3.2 trillion web of deals. Secrets and global ambition. What really happened on that trip? And was Trump simply representing the US or building an empire of his own? Let's unpack the real story behind the purple carpet. Diplomacy that could reshape the balance of global power. Chapter 1. The Royal. Welcome like no other imagined this. Air Force One touches down, and instead of just a red carpet, there's a deep royal purple one rolled out for Trump alone. Flashing lights, rows of dignitaries. A fleet of golden armored vehicles, with 15 jets doing aerial stunts above the palace. It wasn't just hospitality. It was pageantry on a scale the world hadn't seen for an American president. But this wasn't a random show of affection. It was strategic. It was deliberate. It was Saudi Arabia and the Gulf at large saying, we're ready for something bigger. Trump was greeted like royalty, seated in halls lined with gold. There were gifts, lavish dinners, and every symbol of wealth imaginable. But even as cameras flashed, talks were already underway, talks that would unlock some of the largest economic and military deals in U.S. history. Chapter 2. The billion-dollar spectacle. Now, most state visits are polite, brief, and somewhat dull. This was different. Trump's motorcade paraded through Riyadh under spotlights as drones recorded every moment. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al-Bis watched from above like a director watching the main actor nail his scene. The visual was crafted perfectly. Trump compared MBS to King Solomon wise, bold, and immensely wealthy. And the Saudi media ran with it. The image projected was clear. Trump wasn't just visiting, he was anointed. Critics immediately called it theater, a manufactured photo op, a distraction from real issues like human rights or regional conflicts. But even they admitted this was effective. Trump came not just to talk policy, but to build spectacle, and that spectacle, it came with one of the largest economic undertakings the U.S. had ever touched in the Gulf. Chapter 3. The trillion-dollar web of deals. Let's talk numbers. Not millions. Not even billions. Trillions. Saudi Arabia alone pledged $600 billion in new partnerships, with $142 billion set aside for arms. That's the biggest U.S.-Saudi weapons deal in history. The UAE? They jumped in with $1.4 trillion across artificial intelligence, defense, real estate, and tech. Qatar followed with another $1.2 trillion, throwing in Boeing jet orders, base upgrades, and AI investments. Stack it all up, and you've got a dizzying $3.20 trillion in agreements, everything from cloud computing with Google and Oracle to semiconductors and military tech. But not everyone was convinced. A deep dive revealed that only about $700 billion of that total were confirmed contracts. The rest? Memorandums of understanding, non-binding promises, often used for headlines more than handshakes. Still, for Trump, the headlines were enough. The message had been delivered. He was back on the world stage. And the Gulf was all in. Chapter 4. The Trump brand and the Gulf fantasy. But there's more. Because this visit wasn't just diplomacy, it was also brand expansion. Trump's name has long been tied to luxury. Gilded towers, private clubs, golf courses with gold-trimmed logos, and the Gulf. It craves that kind of symbolism. During and after his presidency, Trump-branded projects began popping up across the region. In Dubai, an 80-story Trump Tower was planned on the Palm Jumeirah. In Jeddah, a 47-story skyscraper began rising on. The Corniche complete with spas, sea views, and private lounges. Riyadh, next in line. Oman, already breaking ground on Trump golf resorts and villa complexes. The Trump Organization wasn't just along for the ride, it was at the table. What made this brilliant and controversial was how business and politics blurred. These weren't just real estate deals. They were part of the same diplomatic portfolio that involved US defense, tech, and foreign policy. In the Gulf, Trump wasn't just a former president. He was a brand, a magnet for foreign capital, and a signal of Western approval. Chapter 5. Diplomacy, marketing, or both? Now, let's pause and ask the real question. Was this about diplomacy, or was it marketing? Gulf leaders are practical. They want two things: security and status. Trump offered both. His visit delivered promises of US weapons, AI innovation, nuclear talks, and most importantly, visibility. His style appealed to their vision of modernity. Bigger, shinier, flashier. The purple carpet wasn't just decoration. It was strategy. A global image booster. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar deepened their involvement in US tech and military supply chains. Nuclear energy conversations were revived. Civil tech agreements were initiated. And all of it came with Trump's seal of approval, but the visual noise jets, palaces, gold made it hard to separate policy from promotion. Was this really America acting? Or was it Trump turning foreign diplomacy into a worldwide business pitch? Chapter 6. The family business booms, and this is where things get sticky. Reports surfaced that Gulf investments flowed not just into Trump's businesses, but into his families as well. Jared Kushner's private equity firm received $3.5 billion from Saudi, Emirati, and Qatari investors, even while he remained politically connected. A Qatar-backed crypto fund invested $2 billion in a Trump-linked crypto venture based in Dubai. The Trump Organization's hotel properties received hundreds of thousands from Gulf delegations for events and stays. Then there was the Boeing 747, $400 million. Aircraft reportedly gifted by Qatar. That set off alarm bells for ethics watchdogs, citing the U.S. Constitution's emoluments clause, which prohibits presidents from accepting foreign gifts without Congress's approval. Trump's team claimed all of this was legal, but legal experts weren't convinced. Without a blind trust or independent oversight, they warned. Trump's private empire was directly profiting from foreign governments. It wasn't just about appearance. It raised serious questions. Were U.S. policy decisions influenced by private business goals? And if so, who was really steering the ship? Chapter 7. A new Gulf oil or risky bet? Despite all the controversy, many Gulf leaders didn't blink. In fact, they doubled down. They saw in Trump a kind of certainty. Deals move fast. The optics were strong. The messaging clear. Qatar's 210 jet, Boeing order alone created more than 150,000 U.S. jobs. U.S. defense firms like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman benefited massively. Gulf states, meanwhile, moved toward economic diversification with mega campuses in Abu Dhabi and new semiconductor hubs across the Emirates. This wasn't just about oil anymore. The Gulf was buying its way into the future. But with every investment, one thing became clear. They wanted influence just as much as innovation, and they believed Trump was their shortcut to both. Chapter 8. Global stakes. Global games, the ripple effects weren't just economic. Iran watched closely as its Gulf neighbors armed up with U.S. weapons and signed tech deals with American firms. Israel, too, became more vocal, pushing against Iran's influence while quietly cheering Trump's aggressive diplomacy. Meanwhile, Oman played host to delicate back-channel talks between the U.S. and Iran, trying to calm the waters. But after Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and the Gulf's growing alignment with Western military powers, tension was unavoidable. Gulf stock markets wobbled, oil prices bounced, and regional peace looked fragile, one wrong move from disaster. Still, the Gulf was focused on business, and Trump, he gave them the golden handshake they needed. Final hook. So now we have to ask, did Trump walk into Saudi Arabia as a former president or as a king without a crown? Was this masterful diplomacy or the beginning of a billionaire's global takeover? He walked out with $3.2 trillion in promises, towers bearing his name across the Gulf, and an entire region reshaped in his image. But the line between national service and self-service has never looked so blurred. Was this America first or Trump first? Tete, now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Trump building a new world order, or just his brand empire on a golden rug? Hit that like button if this deep dive gave you something to think about. Drop a comment with your take on the $1 trillion handshake. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story like this again, because in this world, the real power plays don't always happen in public. Sometimes they're written in gold